Gary Thomas, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Been a longtime fan of yours. Um, I was mentioning on Monday, we were going back and forth a little bit on Instagram, and I mentioned that there's a solo of yours that I frequently assign to my students. And it's your Donna Lee solo on Wallace Roney's. I had it up here. Let's see here. Oh, there it is. No, no job too big or small.
Yeah. Well, that I think the that must be a compilation disc.
Hmm.
No, yeah, I believe so because unless they renamed it because I remember doing that recording and it had a different title
Okay.
and that had to have been around I don't know maybe around 1987 or 88 or something.
And it's super killing. Super killing, and it's, super killing, man. And you are, uh, yeah. I mean, you're a tremendous saxophonist,
Oh, thank
and
you.
you're a multi instrumentalist. You play flute, and on Instagram, most of the stuff that I've seen on your Instagram has actually been your flute playing. You have this, what is it, Flute Thursdays or Thursday?
Yeah, yeah. I started that a few years ago. I up until about 3 years ago, I just avoided social media altogether.
Mm.
And a friend of mine who used to work with me, just a trumpet player named Dante Winslow, who lives out on the East Coast. He's originally from Baltimore, but he called me up one day and he said, "Man, you have to get on Instagram. You just have to do that."
Yeah.
So I did. It took me about 3 days to figure out how to post something, and then finally I got something on there.
Yeah, the social media thing, I'm kind of, it seems like we're stuck with that.
Yeah,
It's not really the way that I would like to communicate with folks, but it's the way that young folks are communicating. And so it kind of puts us in a situation where if you're not putting content out fairly regularly,
yeah.
and I would actually advocate for at least weekly, if not daily. I mean, it's and it's like another job. It's like, come on, man.
Well, what I do is I practice, and I turn the recorder on, and then I'll cut a clip from something that I've been practicing,
Right.
and that way
Yeah,
it's easy. It's useful instead of me just going to my recorder and my flute to record something, especially for Instagram. I
right.
just do it like in as part of the process.
Yeah, that's what I started doing. I do these things as hot licks.
Yeah, yeah,
You
I
know,
enjoy those.
thank you, man. That means a lot. Um, you know, and okay, so and I'm not really a lick player.
Yeah,
That's not the way that I, you know, that I improvise. I'm not like, okay, let me take this, 2-5-1 or this pattern. Let me play that lick. I know where I've got an F7 coming up here. I know I
yeah,
can play that there. Of course, I teach that way. An aspect of my teaching is that way.
yeah,
I'm trying to get them to transcend that. You know, okay, now if this is a step along the process of you learning how to have more liberty with what's happening in more sort of a stream of consciousness and less of sort of like, I know I can play this here. This is my, this is my, this is the good stuff I've been shedding. Hey, I got to make sure that I can play that.
yeah, yeah,
Because, um, but I started doing those lines. You see other guys doing, not maybe not exactly the same thing, but kind of similar thing. You see guys that they'll play a line, they play it up to speed, then they'll play it at like at the slow tempo, then at the
Yeah.
medium tempo, and then the fast tempo, so you can see their hands and stuff, especially like guitar players and things. And yeah, so I did that, and I did it for a year. And since and I completed that actually December. It would have been December 2020 because I started in December 2019.
Okay.
So before the pandemic started, and then and I did it each day, and I don't know, you get to about 50, I don't know, somewhere between 50 days in a row or 75 days, and then it's like, okay, I need to have more of a system now.
Yeah.
So then I started coming downstairs at the same time. I have this routine. My son is 8. So I would, get my son ready for bed. Okay, I give him dinner. Then I come downstairs, and I figured it out. I could, reliably could come up with something in a, I don't know, 15 to 20 minute period. Usually something would occur to me right away. But
Yeah.
sometimes you get a little bit stuck, and I'd be like, I want to make sure I'm not repeating myself, and all of that. So, but yeah, it's an interesting kind of thing, and then it turned into a book. So now it's, I had somebody transcribe all the lines and then
really?
write them
Wow.
out in all keys, and yeah, it's a lot of pages. It's a PDF. And that wasn't my goal in the beginning. My goal in the beginning was just like, okay, I want to maybe show some versatility. Like, I'll play these on different instruments. Maybe I want to keep myself being creative, even if it's just a short thing. I was trying to do that kind of thing. But yeah.
Well,
So,
I guess I have a similar approach, because I pretty much do the same things every day. I mean, not the content, but the way that I practice things. Like for instance, like I said, I get up in the mornings, like 4 o'clock, 4:30, and if I'm up at 4:30, or I'll grab my flute and put on a metronome and just practice some of the finger motions for whatever line I'm working on. So I'll put and I'll turn the news on and sit there and watch the news, and I'll just go. And that is without the metronome, because generally I'll put either a metronome on very quietly, because nobody wants to hear that but me, and or I'll put on something like Drum Genius and practice with that. And I'll do that for about 40 minutes. And basically what I do is I try to do a run through of all the things that I would consider to be staples in my playing. So there, because generally I work on a lot of shapes. And for one is this thing that's based on a nonatonic scale, 9-tone scale. Or in a different direction. And that was with the sound, but if you were to come downstairs in the middle of the morning and I'm here, you would hear this. And that's every day.
Yeah, and on flute, the key clacks it's close to the same pitch because it's cylindrical and not conical.
Right.
Like on saxophone, you do the key clacks are like different pitches than the notes. Not always, but as you get, what is it, further down or whatever, it starts to generate different pitches.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. Now you have an acoustic bass behind you, and a buddy of mine, Dwight Adams,
Thank you so much for watching my video so far. If you'd like to support, there are several ways to do so below. Also, likes are free. Please comment, share, and subscribe. Now back to the video.
I actually have one of his horns in here.
Yeah.
Well, it's not his horn anymore. I traded him for it. and I don't actually really play trumpet. I mean, when I was a kid, I learned how to play a little bit, like a couple tunes or something, and then I was like, I don't want to do that anymore. And then a few years ago, Dwight and I had this idea. I was like, okay, check it out, because he's got kids and my son's 8, and I was like, okay, how about I'll trade you a saxophone for a trumpet, and then we'll do Skype lessons. So we'll teach each other how to play those instruments. So, in case our kids decided that they wanted to play one of those other instruments, at least we could get them started. So that was the idea. But that was also kind of like right at the beginning of my degree program, my doctoral degree program. And once that really got started, there wasn't there wasn't much time for me to really get the trumpet happening. But you see there's some basses. Yeah. You see there's some basses on the wall behind me also. So I know you play, and you don't just play. I mean, you gig. You gig on bass, right?
I don't anymore though. What happened was I started a jazz program in Baltimore at this Peabody Conservatory. And that was around 1990, 98. And it was just sort of a thing where, some of the classical students were interested in studying improvisation and jazz, and ultimately it it was like a groundswell, and they decided that they wanted a degree program. So around 2001, 2002, they instituted a degree program. And when we got our first class of students in, we had several drummers, but only one or two bass players. So I decided to learn how to play the bass so that there would be at least another bass player around to play with some of the drummers. And it got to the point where I was actually able to make gigs, and people would call me, sub for different gigs, and I posted one thing on Instagram a while ago with my bass playing on it, but I stopped playing it only because for me it was a little bit difficult to make the transition from playing the bass to going to the flute, and I found that with the string height of the bass and the tension and everything was starting to make my fingers a little less nimble.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, my left hand, and then when I went to the flute, or the saxophone, it got to the point where I couldn't play a chromatic scale evenly. So that's why I left the bass alone.
Yeah, I don't play acoustic. It's all electric for me. But I will admit that I've had some issues with my left hand in particular. It doesn't seem to affect but see, the thing is that that's making me wonder. I thought that some things I was doing in the gym was creating some stiffness in my hands that of course I don't want. So what I did was so first of all, I was doing a lot of wrist curls at one point.
Yeah.
And I stopped doing that. I was doing them once a week, but I just stopped doing that because I felt like if I didn't get right to an instrument and practice, I could really I could start to tell week to week. I could start to tell a difference in consistency, speed,
Yeah.
all of that kind of stuff. And I was having an issue with the stringed instruments, the guitar and the bass. I started on bass, and then I added guitar years later.
Yeah.
But on the bass, I was playing really heavy tension stuff. And I had to I went through this process of lightening the tension, so thinner strings, because I was just trying to manhandle the instrument, basically.
Yeah.
And then I started to notice that I was having some issues with my hand was falling asleep, my left hand. And for the most part, I was thinking that this was coming from that sort of cluster of nerves that's back here.
Yeah.
And my shoulders. I've had a lot of issues with my shoulders. So I was kind of saying, okay, it's that. But recently I've started to have this thing where I've got some tendonitis, here, and I don't know. And it seems like
I've seen you play all kinds of instruments. I remember seeing you play. You were playing something with a piccolo, and it looked like it was.
Oh, right. But that makes sense though, especially with the action on some of the acoustic basses, how high the action is, especially depending on what kind of sound you're trying to get. I mean, you could, but I don't know. I was talking to Rodney Whitaker. I interviewed him on this program also, and I was asking him some questions about the action on his bass, because he gets this huge sound. Like it's like he doesn't even need an amplifier.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so this is a story. So years ago, this was 20 years ago. This is a long time ago. I called him for a gig. He was director of jazz studies at Michigan State, so it wasn't
Oh yeah, I remember.
too long ago. But it was about maybe 20 years ago. And I had this gig in Kalamazoo where once a month, it was a regular Friday, and once a month they gave me a bigger budget and I could bring in a guest. So I brought him in, and it's in this place. The place is called District 211. I don't even know if they even do music in that place anymore. But it was a renovated office building where when you walk in the building, you walk down a flight of steps, and then it's all open. Everything is totally open in there, and it's like brick and hard floors. It's like this. So it's like almost like cavernous.
Okay.
The acoustics in that place. And so it could make it very challenging to hear the bass player in particular. And I couldn't believe it. I mean, I asked him, I said, so, I mean, do you have an amp? I was going to help him haul his amp. He was like, no. So, I don't need an amp. And I was like, well, I'm thinking you haven't played in this place. This thing is cavernous. There's no way you're going to be heard, right? I mean, and plus, people are talking. It's a restaurant. People are talking, clanking glasses and stuff. Man, this dude, I couldn't believe it. He filled the whole room.
Yeah.
No amp. Right beside the drummer. I couldn't believe it. It was the most amazing thing I've ever seen. I mean, acoustically. So, and I asked him about it. He was like, oh yeah, it's about the, and I was like, so your action's got to be a mile high. He says, oh no. He says, no, it's low. He says, Ray Brown told him that, you could have low action and still get that same kind of sound. And then you hear the stories about John Patitucci, early John Patitucci, where he was playing with really high action, right? But he went through a transition where now his action is much lower. He's got pretty low action now, but he's still getting this huge sound. So I don't know. Anyhow, that just it made me think of that, because it seems like impossible that you could get an acoustic bass to be that present in a room like that. But hey, prove me wrong.
Well, that for me, I actually had low action on my bass also, and it seemed like the sound really did cut through anyway.
Yeah. All right. So you were talking about okay. So in our messaging back and forth on Monday,
Yeah.
you said that you were going to be back up at 7. In 7 hours. You said you would be in the gym, and I was doing the math on that. It was something like 6 a.m. or something like that. Is that right?
I don't remember now. You mean when we were talking, or when I said I would be?
Yeah, you were talking about being in the gym the next morning.
Yeah. I was probably up around, I think I was probably up around 5 o'clock in the gym. I mean, I have my stuff in the basement in the house. So.
Right. Yeah. So that time working out that early, that seems to work for you. That it would be very difficult for me to work out that early. Maybe I could get used to it.
Well, see, I've done that all my life, though. Even when I was a kid, I was always up before everybody else. Walking around in the house trying to figure out what to do. And everybody else is asleep. I'm talking about hours before everybody else got up. I would be, trying to figure out what to do.
Now this is a combination of going to bed early and then getting up early because you went to bed earlier, or is this a function of you don't sleep necessarily as much maybe as other folks do?
I don't think I sleep as much as other people do. In
Yeah,
fact,
I sleep.
I had a scare one time. I was on a tour with Michelle Rosewoman, and we were going through Canada, and we went to Edmonton, and we had a day off. So, we checked into the hotel. This the afternoon, and I ordered some food, room service, ate, and then I fell asleep. And when I woke up, the sun, it was really, really bright. The sun was really bright, and it scared me because I thought that I had slept the entire night. And I'm talking about hours, though, because generally if I sleep, it's generally about 5 or 6 hours at the most. But the way it appeared to me when I woke up was that I had been asleep for 12 hours or so, and it scared the hell out of me because I had never slept that long. I don't, even if I'm, I think I have this internal clock that wakes me up. So if I walk into the house at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'll probably wake up at 5. So that, that really scared me, but it was because we were so far north that, the sun was still out when I woke up that night.
I see. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't sleep as much as other folks do either. I don't know, 4.5, 5 hours like that. It seems that's about the common amount. And then there's one day a week where I get closer to 8 hours. That's Saturdays. I sleep in because on Saturdays, but part of it is because with my son, we do our activities and things, but when he goes to bed, okay, that's time for me to do work. That's for me to do some work, and depending on what it is, it may take me several hours to get whatever completed, and doing like interviews and things like that. And like after this interview is done, I'm gonna actually do the editing in the video and render the video, and start uploading it. So that stuff takes a little bit of time, and then I get you get into a certain pattern or a certain habit, where if I tried to go to sleep earlier, I don't think I could go to sleep. I think I would just be laying there like, okay, and just be thinking about all this stuff, like, oh, what could I be doing right now? I should be doing this other thing. So it's like, why not just get up and do those things if I'm not going to be sleeping anyway? And they say if you have issues sleeping, if you're having like, issues with insomnia or whatever, that if you go to lay down to go to sleep and you're just like laying in there for an hour or whatever like that, they'll say, hey, just get up, go do something else, and then try it again later. And I had some issues with insomnia. It was associated with some anxiety and panic attacks and a bunch of stuff. It was pretty funky. And I know the stress event that kind of got it started.
Yeah.
But it's like once it got started, it's like I could not do anything to slow that thing down. And then that kind of trifecta, that group of three things is just tremendous to break that sort of cycle. But I'm doing fine now. Everything's fine now. But that scared me because it's the only time in my life when I've ever had to have a routine, like a sleeping routine.
Yeah.
I've never had to do that. I just basically work hard all day, do all the stuff, and until I can't stay awake anymore, go to sleep, and then get up the next day.
It's the same for me, but because I when I tell people how I sleep, they say, well, so when do you generally go to bed? And I say, well, I'll just fall asleep. It doesn't, it's not connected to any specific time. If I'm sitting in a house and I'm not doing anything at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I might just fall asleep, and I may sleep for about 3 or 4 hours. And then I'll be up, and then I'll fall asleep again in the middle of the morning, and I'll get up at 4 o'clock, 4:30, and go through my little practice routine, and then I'll go to the basement and work out.
Can you talk a little bit?
I generally work out, about five days a week, and once in a while I'll do some stuff like on a Saturday or something, but for the most part, it's about 5 days a week, and my workouts are usually last for about an hour and 20 minutes.
Can you talk a little bit about the role of routine? I mean, how? Okay, so this is a bit of an abstract question, but I'm sure it's the kind of thing that you try to instill in your students.
I try
to get. But why is it important to have these sort of routines? Why in your own productivity, in your own musical career, and all of the things that you're doing and that you're trying to develop, why has this routine thing been so important?
Well, I guess if you're playing music, then you have to practice. You have to practice consistently, and the big thing is just developing that muscle memory. And if you're not doing that every day, you're not developing the type of muscle memory that you need in order to play music in a way that allows you to play freely.
Oh.
Because I'll go to the same things every day, and like I said, I have certain. If I don't think I have a lot of time, then I'll sit down and I'll just practice through the things that I consider to be staples of my playing. Just maybe one time, but I try to touch on some of the same things every day.
See, that's interesting because you said something that is not intuitively obvious. You said that this routine thing set you up to play. You said freedom. You said freedom, but
right.
Liberty. Okay, so something that I say frequently is this idea that you have to prepare for spontaneity.
Yeah,
And
I think so.
of course, that doesn't, you're right. And that, again, it on the surface, it's like, really prepare for spontaneity. That's just sounds like a trick. Like, what are you actually saying? Well, the thing is that if I am totally fluent in a particular key, so say for instance, if F major, I am totally familiar with the key, demonstrated by the number of patterns and shapes that I can generate in that key.
Yeah.
Without necessarily having to think about it or having to work it out, right? But maybe F sharp major, maybe not so much. If you ask me to improvise an F, I'm going to be able to be free and at liberty and play all this stuff. You ask me to do it in F sharp, all of a sudden it's going to start sounding very limited, and actually will start to sound more rigid.
Yeah. Well, there are a lot of people who complain about those play along recordings of the Jamie Aebersold recordings.
Yeah.
But there's some that I feel like I think that they're valuable because they're different tunes in different keys. I mean, and I mean that run through all the keys. Like for instance, there's Cherokee, which is something I practice all of the time in 12 keys. This I Dig of You in 12 keys. It's Your No One in 12 keys. Stella by Starlight in 12 keys. Like, and for instance, with Stella by Starlight, you'll run across so many different types of harmonic functions in a tune like that, and to be able to play it in 12 keys is just it's beneficial to just developing your skill to play on anything. Because it starts with like with a half diminished chord on one, which really could be like the one Lydian. Say it starts on E half diminished, but it could also be like B flat major 7 sharp.
Right.
Yeah. And then it has like 4 flat 7, substitutions. Then it has, in the version that I have on the Aebersold disc, it has like this whole progression of chromatic 2 5s at the end of the form. So there are minor 2 5s in it. There are changes that are stepping up, in whole steps. So I mean, every day I'll get up and I'll practice something in 12 keys, and sometimes I'll practice multiple things in 12 keys. Giant steps I have, I'll mess with that in 12 keys. All the things you are.
Yeah, there's that challenging tunes in all keys play along, and it has giant steps and all the things you are, and a bunch of a few others. There's I Got Rhythm. It's so rhythm changes in all keys. There's a blues in all keys. There's a minor blues in all keys.
4 Autumn Leaves.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the technology thing is interesting because you always have folks that, the technology is the problem. The reason that X, Y, and Z is this way is because this new technology has like replaced, this other thing.
Yeah.
And my sort of approach to this has always been to just embrace the technology, try to figure out how to interface with it in a way that doesn't take away from me, but that adds something, maybe some more efficiency or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But I do understand this idea, this point, where, what 15 years ago or something, 20 years ago, whenever that exact time period was, when music started to become sort of available for free.
Yeah.
and then everyone had access to, and now we have access to like everything, every thing in recorded history is like on YouTube or something, or most of it at least is. And so you can get so much music, but you don't necessarily have to have like the same skin in the game, right?
Right.
You didn't have to go buy the record. You didn't have like limited resources, so you could only get one record, and that meant that you had to listen to that one record over and over and over, so you became a lot more familiar with that one record.
Well, that was me in 1970, like around 1977, 78.
Yeah, I mean,
like we haven't, we just had enough money to get a couple albums here and there, So.
Yeah, and like when a new joint came out, you would go get it, and then you would spend so much time with that same recording, and then that whole idea of listening together, listening parties. Now I think a listening party is like there's something in no, it's called a watch party.
Yeah,
I think this, so like in Facebook or something, it's like a watch party. So you all watch the same video together, but you're not in the same room, right? It's all virtual,
yeah.
right? And I'm not against that. It's just, it's not the same as being in the same room and having limited access to stuff. So the stuff that you picked, you had to be really specific and deliberate about it. And then it just made it stick to you more. Now, it's definitely better having more access to more information. That's definitely a plus. But unless...
I think you have to have to make a choice, though. Once you'd have to choose the things that you think might be useful. Because you can't deal with everything.
You have to do that, and I think it's tremendously beneficial for folks like you and me that are old enough to remember what it was like before. So we developed our sort of appreciation for the music. We developed that earlier when all of this wasn't available. So now that it is available, it's like, oh man, like all this stuff, and we can actually take the same approach, but have a bigger access. Whereas it seems like what's happening with students now is because they have so much access that they become very shallow in a lot of stuff.
Yeah, so it's more about naming what which recordings they had access to, because they're all available. But also I think going back to 1978, 77, 78, 79, we had fewer distractions. We weren't answering text messages and sending text messages and shit. No one had a cell phone. And we didn't have, music playing on our phones. We had to go get that music and buy two recordings if you had the money for it, and listen to those recordings. And as a distraction,
like even like having a good place in your house.
Yeah.
Yeah, even having like a good place in your house, like with a nice like set of speakers. And you're actually, and not just in the, with headphones. And I'm not against headphones, of course. Headphones are great. But it's just different. It's just different.
My turntable was this cheap thing that was the case was actually made of cardboard, like a heavy cardboard. And it had, the multiple speeds, and I would turn it down to, I can't remember now, I guess I would turn it down to 78 or something if I wanted to transcribe something that was fast.
And it took it down an octave, right?
Took it down about an octave, yeah.
Yeah.
But that was what you would get. You couldn't tweak it. It was one or the other.
Right. Now there's like a button on your phone that will slow stuff down without changing the pitch. And it's gradient. You can do.
There's that function in Logic where you can transcribe a single audio line and have it converted to like a MIDI file.
Yep. And actually, I first started noticing that because the program Finale, it had and this is a long time ago that they were doing this too. I mean, of course, it still does this. Microphone notator. So you can actually play an audio or sing something if you can sing pitches well enough, and it'll actually transcribe what you're singing or playing. So that told me that capability existed, and that they were going to continue to improve that. So yeah, now it's just like load the audio file in, and it'll kick out MIDI notes.
Yeah.
It's crazy stuff.
Yes, a former student of mine told me about it, and I had to try it. I just played some really crazy stuff, and it came pretty close to transcribing everything perfect. Like rhythms and all, everything.
Yeah, that's incredible. All right, so you're a fitness guy. How does the fitness stuff? How does that interface with your musicianship? I mean, you hear people say stuff like a healthy body, a healthy mind, and all of that kind of stuff. But, have there been times in your life when you weren't able to work out? And did you notice a difference in the way that, your efficiency in the practice room, clarity of thought, all of that kind of stuff?
That's a tough one to answer because, once I started working out, which was probably during the early 80s, I have never had a gap in my workout routine. There's never been a period where I've been off for a week. I haven't done that since I started working out. And I remember it had to have been like around 81 or 82 when I started working out. And I've just been doing that regularly since then.
That's incredible. So
and then it got to the point where I was carrying, I had these rubber cables that had tension on them, and I would carry them in my suitcases if I was on tour. And it had gotten to the point where I would carry a separate, those small suitcases. I used to keep dumbbells.
Oh.
in the small suitcase, and I had a large suitcase with all my clothes, and I would carry protein powders and all kinds of stuff around in my suitcase. And sometimes, we would land in a place, and then there would be somebody to come, pick us up. And most times they would opt for the smaller suitcase without realizing that, weights were in that suitcase. They were going to help. They would avoid the large suitcase and then grab the one with the weights in it.
Right. It was like, oh snap! There's something in there.
Yeah. So I've been consistent since the beginning of the 80s with workout and my like diet and everything. And that's I'm 61 now, so
that's incredible. So you're a hardy guy then. You don't get sick very often?
No.
Yeah, that's what's up. That's what's up. And the reason I'm asking you this stuff is, I'm a fitness advocate, and far too often is the case that, I mean, well, you've heard the term, you may have heard the term, it's a pejorative, musician's physique. That's not, that's, it's not a positive connotation, right?
Yeah,
Because
yeah,
the implication is, you know, we spend all these hours practicing, sitting in a room by ourselves and all like this, and often is the case that, you know, going to the gym, doing stuff that's more active, you know, it's like you get kind of sedentary and, you know, overweight and all that kind of stuff. And of course that stuff eventually is going to take away from your ability to continue to play music.
yeah.
You know, when you get to a certain age, first of all, you're going to get sick more often, you know, and you're not going to be able to do it for as long. I mean, if you're healthy, if you have this kind of routine, this regimen that you've been on for all these years, that's just going to make it so that you can continue to do this. I mean, pretty much as long as you want to.
Well, and then I have my I have my little habits where, you know, I tend to I do like sugar. So, you know, I'll go out almost every day and grab something that, like, you know, like a piece of carrot cake or, you know, some kind of chocolate, something or another. And I've been able to, you know, stay pretty much in shape. Because usually what I do is I do my, you know, workout routine in the morning, and not long afterwards I'll run out and grab something that you know might be full of sugar. But it's not a thing that happens all day long. You know, I'll have something in the morning after I've worked out, you know, hard, and that's my excuse.
Yeah, I think I use that excuse too much. My issue has been, you know, because the kitchen is undefeated. You can't. It's not possible to overcome, you know, a horrible diet. You have a horrible diet. I mean, 5 days a week, 6 days a week, 7 days a week, 2-a-days. It doesn't matter what you do.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to overcome that. And I think what has happened to me is, because it's like, oh yeah, I mean, I'm in here 5 days a week, you know, hey, I can get this extra bowl of ice cream. It's all right, because, you know, I'm going to be in there, you know. It's like, well, not if you eat the ice cream right before you go to bed. So that's my that's one of my bad habits. Is,
well, see, I keep my desserts limited to the mornings, like early.
Right, and that's right. Yeah. I noticed you saying that, and I'm drawing the contrast that right before you go to bed is not a good idea. Yeah. That's, I mean, all that stuff is just goes straight to storage, and that's not a good thing.
Yeah, but I've been doing it for for so long, you know, that this. Mm-hmm. I think I would feel sick if I didn't continue with that routine.
Yeah, that's incredible. And you know, the thing is that in your playing, I'm not surprised by our conversation. You know, aspects of our conversation. It's like I hear that in your playing.
Yeah.
I hear that discipline, that, you know, that, and I don't mean I hear it in that your playing is predictable, because it's not predictable at all. It's very free, and but I have an idea of what it takes to sound like that, and I think the kind of person that you have to be, and the kind of disciplined person I think you have to be to get to a place where you can sound that way.
Well, see, I'm also I'm gonna say I'm I would call myself an autodidact. Because I was in college for a year. So my musical studies were pretty much limited to what I did on my own. In the middle, I guess in the around 1976, I went to the Peabody Conservatory and took some lessons with a flute teacher there, and that's where I started. And then when I got to high school, I thought that I wanted to play every instrument, so I started playing bassoon. I was playing oboe, clarinet, and then I picked up the saxophone. And after I left high school, I went to Howard University for a year. I couldn't afford to keep going, but the good thing for me was when I got there were other people who were enrolling at the same time, like good musicians, and there were a couple who had been there for a while. Wallace Roney and I were freshmen in the same year, and Wallace was, the player that you heard, that you probably heard most recently, was the same guy that I met in my first year of college. I mean, he was the kind of player that, he never opened up a fake book to look for changes. He could hear a solo and then sit down and write it down. Or you can hear an entire tune. You could hear an entire tune and write the tune out after hearing it. Changes and everything. And I remember, after I did my first transcription, which was it was an assignment. It was an assignment for the improv class at Howard. Dexter Gordon on "It's True or No One." I transcribed that, and we were supposed to play it in the morning, for the teacher. And when I walked into the school, I was feeling proud of myself for having spent weeks on this solo. And when I walked in, I saw Wallace sitting at the piano. Wasn't using the piano, but I saw him sitting at the piano writing down the solo that he was going to play in improv. And then he just chose a solo. He said, "I'm going to do the solo." I remember it was Carmel Jones. I don't remember the solo, but he said, I'm going to play this one. And then he started writing it. Yeah.
That's crazy.
So I didn't get to go to school for very long, but there were some really good influences there, because Greg Osby and I got there together, and we shared a practice room and, spent a lot of time, practicing together. And on the backside of our practice room, the room that was adjacent to ours, Jerry Allen was in that room. So I think after that first year of being at Howard, I had heard enough to know what I needed to do after that.
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about your practice routine.
Yeah.
What else are you practicing? I mean, you mentioned this 9-note scale and some shapes associated with that.
Yeah.
What other things have you been getting into in your practicing?
Well, I work a lot with symmetrical scales and the patterns that are associated with augmented scales, diminished scales, and again that 9-note scale. And at the moment, I'm just trying to get to the point where I can mix those things, because once you get set into a pattern, sometimes it's hard to break the pattern without completely destroying it. So my thing now is just to continue working on mixing some of the patterns. Like, for instance, the 9-note scale is they're different. I guess they're different transpositions of it. But the 9-note scale that I like to use is one that has 3 minor trichords that are major thirds apart. For instance, you have So like C minor, first three notes of C minor, first three notes of E minor, and then the first three notes of A flat minor.
Oh yeah.
But instead of using it in a linear fashion, then I figured out a way to use it so that it's more shape oriented. So the thing that I was playing before. And then the augmented scales. Or the associated triads. So I use a lot of things like that, and then one of the things that I use the most is just the diminished scales, but broken up into patterns also.
Now you said something about and move over a little bit because you're getting further and further.
Oh, sorry.
Out of the screen. That's all right. So what was I going to say? Okay. So you said something about mixing things. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like so integrating the concepts so that you can kind of go between the different concepts. Now, what is your what is your approach to developing more fluidity between the concepts? So not just in developing fluidity within a particular construct, but between to be able to go between the concepts or the constructs.
Well, I think most of that is about just spending the time playing and trying to find ways to weave the things together.
Okay.
So usually what I'll do is I'll put on like some drum loop from, what's the name of the Drum Genius, and then I'll just play freely. And then I'll go back to playing things, playing tunes with changes, because for the most part I want to be able to play those things over the tunes that have changes. I mean, it's pretty like when you're not playing with changes, then you can do whatever you want. But I want to also be able to play these things that I'm working on, with some constraints.
Yeah, that's interesting because your approach is very similar to my approach. Okay, so the book Patterns for Jazz Improvisation, Oliver Nelson.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, standard reference, great book, but it's not a systematic book, and he doesn't even really try to associate things with chord changes or anything. It's just a bunch of patterns, okay?
Right.
And so it's kind of like this kind of patterns distributed freely kind of a thing. So and what I started to do with that book, and this is something that I encourage my students to do in conjunction with something that's more systematic, and you just described it as being, obviously you need to be able to play whatever you're going to play over changes. So that's the more systematic aspect. but the more sort of free aspect is just developing patterns and shapes that are not necessarily married to a particular progression. And then what I've done is, rather than trying to systematize the way that those patterns are going to actually occur, I will just allow my ear to interact with whatever those patterns are.
Yeah.
And then as I'm improvising, stuff will start to occur to me. And then, you're always like recording yourself and listening to yourself back. And it's like, oh, I heard it right there, but I didn't quite land it. Okay, now let me go back and find that. Let me develop that further. Okay,
Yeah.
so then it's like the next time you try it, you're closer to what it is that you had in mind. But that Patterns for Jazz Improvisation, I used that book for, a year and a half or 2 years as a warm-up. I played it cover to cover as the first thing I did in my practice session. And it took a while before I could play the whole book, but I got it to where I was playing it in about 35 minutes.
Yeah.
So, but but I didn't try to say, okay, now let me take this pattern. Okay, now what chords can I play that on? No, that wasn't the point. I was trying to do something that was feeding a sort of an abstract thing, but also that was developing facility with something that had a more kind of interesting, so I mean, I can play, of course I was doing this thing when you were playing scales and all keys and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
this thing, you kind of had the benefit of the technical stuff, but you're also kind of feeding your ear with some sort of abstract shapes and things. And so, but still to this day, I will think that I just came up with a new pattern, and it's something out of that book. Yep.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
But I guess what I usually try to do is, I kind of shape my playing in a way where it feels like very, very linear, and not so how can I say it, embellished. And then all those other things I just sort of stack on top of that. I think I might have lost you. Okay.
Seems like maybe you got a notification or something.
Yeah, so
All right.
I'll do things like that, but then there are times when I'll I may play.
So let me ask you this question, and this is I think when people hear me play, I think that they wouldn't necessarily think that what I'm about to say is true. I mean, in like in a positive way, not like a not in a negative connotation or anything. But I'm an ear player that learned theory later.
Yeah.
So I was playing all kind of stuff I didn't even know what it was, and then I started to figure out what some certain things was. I started when I was really young, and Vincent Chandler, the great trombonist, he's the one that taught me the diminished scale, and I think he taught it to me when I was 16 or something. but I had been playing the diminished scale for years, like, you
Yeah.
know, playing things that implied it, but I didn't actually know what the scale was, right? Um, and I try not to say this too much around my students, but solo transcription has been a very small, uh, you know, component or aspect of my development.
Yeah.
You know, I transcribed 2 solos for college credit, you know, when I was in college. And the reason was that when it was time to, when it would make sense for me to start transcribing solos, because it's kind of a step along the sort of ear training path, I could hear and play back everything I was hearing.
Yeah.
And now I didn't understand it theoretically, so maybe transcribing so that I could analyze things, I think that would have been beneficial. But most of my transcribing has been of compositions. Like, you know, I'll transcribe tunes, orchestration. You know, I remember I did this project. You know, I'm playing church, and I was transcribing an orchestration, the full orchestra of Sandy Patty song Via Dolorosa.
Okay.
And I transcribed the whole thing, all the string parts, everything, every single thing that was on there, the whole thing. But I've done that several times with other projects, and what I've found is that has been a pretty powerful teaching tool for me, because you're learning about not just about what the soloist is playing, you're learning about like how the music is actually functioning, you know. But I'm an ear player that learned theory, as opposed to someone that learned things correctly. I don't know what that is. I don't exactly know what that means exactly. It seems like folks that have the ability, the natural ability to just be able to play what they're hearing.
Yeah.
Naturally, you're going to leave some holes in you know, there's going to be some holes in your fundamentals. But you can always sort of backtrack and say, okay, well, this is the stuff that I was missing along the way, you know?
Well, it was similar for me too, you know, because I didn't, I was transcribing different players, but I didn't know what they were playing. I just, you know, I knew that certain things were being played over certain changes. And that was all, you know, that was all I knew at the time. But, you know, later, you know, there were more books written about the, you know, the theory of the music, and I started buying those books, and because I mean, I didn't know what I could play a diminished scale, but I didn't know what it was. And I knew what it should have been. I knew the sound that it should be associated with at that time. And later on, I started buying books and started reading them and studying them, and then I realized, what certain things were, at least from a technical standpoint.
Yeah.
But in the beginning, I was just playing the things that I heard, the things that I heard other people play.
So, what are you working on right now? Are you working on any projects that you'd like to plug? What are you engaged in?
I'm still trying to figure out how to get all these shapes to come together in my playing. And I guess that'll happen more quickly if and when I get back out in public playing. But I right now am content to just work on it and figure out how to get some of these things to work.
So this sort of period of time that things sort of slow down for you as far as playing gigs and stuff, primarily due to the pandemic, or was it sort of due to other things that you're focused on now prior to the pandemic?
Well, I mean, for the most part, it was due to the fact that I had taught. I was running a music program for 20 years.
Right.
And during that 20-year period, like in the beginning, I was still traveling a lot, but as it got closer to the end, I was not really playing much at all. So my chops were dwindling, and once the pandemic came about, I just figured that I'd use that as use that time to work on things, because I wasn't really very willing to go out and play like on some of these live stream concerts and everything. I just wanted to make sure that when things got a little safer, I could still function.
All right. Well, is there anything that you want to talk about that we didn't mention, or
not that I can think of, but we can always double back at some point. And
that we're definitely going to have to do that. We're definitely going to have to do that because we barely got started. There's a billion things I think we could that we could probe deeper in.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate your time and energy. And I know this is late for you because you're going to be getting up at like 4:30 or something.
Well, I'm good now though, because I knew that this was going to happen. So when, earlier today I took a nap.
I see. All right, we're going to do this again, and I might not wait that long to reach back out to you, because like I said, we're just getting started.
Okay, cool.
All right, man.
We can
all right, well, God bless you.
All right, man. Take care.
All right, man. Peace.
Thank you.